This is the entire story of Leon Kennedy, from his first desperate night in Racoon City, to his intense confrontation with Los Illuminados, all the way to his investigation on Alcatraz Island that turned into a nightmare. His journey is filled with loss, courage, and the unrelenting struggle against bioterror that completely shaped an era, and it's one that begins right off the bat with tragedy. Leon's earliest years were marked by hardship, growing up in the shadow of a family tied to crime. That legacy ended violently when his entire family was murdered, leaving Leon an orphan before he could ever have the chance to build a normal life. In the aftermath, it was a single act of compassion that kept him from being lost entirely, being a police officer who stepped in and helped him survive. That moment became the spark that defined Leon's path forward. From then on, he carried a simple resolve. If one officer could change his life, then he too would dedicate his future to protecting others. And at just 21 years old, Leon graduated from the police academy with that conviction burning inside him, and shortly after, he had successfully landed a job offer at the Racoon Police Department. But just days before he was meant to start, a mysterious phone call urged him not to report for duty. However, Leon ignored the warning, and on the night of September 29, 1998, he drove into Racoon City and into the collapse of a civilization. His first stop was the Mazoil gas station on the outskirts of town. Investigating a loud crash, Leon stumbled upon a grisly sight, being a zombie devouring a police officer. Forced to flee, he encountered a young woman named Claire Redfield outside. The two escaped in a patrol car, but their path was cut short when a tanker exploded in the streets, separating them in the process. After this, each made their own way to the Racoon Police Department. Inside the station, Leon found chaos. Most of the force was already dead, and the survivors were clinging to life. Among them were Elliot Edward and the gravely wounded Lieutenant Marvin Branagh. Leon attempted to save Elliot during a zombie attack, but the officer was torn apart before his eyes. Marvin briefed Leon on a possible secret passage out of the building, entrusting him with the mission to survive. It was there in the underground tunnels that Leon first faced William Birkin, an Umbrella scientist who had injected himself with the unstable G virus. Mutated beyond recognition, Birkin attacked with monstrous strength, forcing Leon into a brutal fight for survival. Though he brought the creature down, Birkin's body fell into the abyss below, his survival uncertain. As Leon pressed deeper, he crossed paths with Ada Wong. She introduced herself as an FBI agent searching for evidence of Umbrella's crimes, and reluctantly, Leon agreed to work with her. Together, they investigated the station, encountering Ben Bertolucci, a reporter who had uncovered a conspiracy between Umbrella and the local police force. Before he could even hand over proof, Ben was slaughtered in his cell by Umbrella's tyrant, the hulking T-00, sent to eliminate any witnesses. From that moment, the unrelenting monster stalked Leon through the halls of the RPD and beyond, standing as a silent executioner with no weakness. Leon and Ada's search carried them into the sewers, where they were then confronted by a massive infected alligator. After Leon dispatched the beast, they continued on, only to be confronted by Annette Birkin, William's wife and a key Umbrella researcher. At this point, Annette clashed with Ada, but did not yet reveal her true identity. The two women fought, and Leon was caught in the middle, injured in the crossfire, but still determined to press forward. Their pursuit eventually led them onto a transport platform, descending into Nest, Umbrella's underground laboratory. During the descent, Leon and Ada found a rare moment of quiet. Exhausted from the horrors above, Leon opened up, and the two shared a brief, intimate kiss as they made their way down to the lab. Once inside Nest, Leon began to explore the sprawling lab, uncovering the depths of Umbrella's research. There, he crossed paths once again with William Birkin, now mutated further into something monstrous. Leon fought him deep within the facility, battling against a man consumed by his own creation. And after the brutal encounter, Annette finally revealed the truth. Ada was not an FBI agent at all, but a mercenary working to steal the G-virus for her own employers. Feeling betrayed, Leon confronted Ada. Their partnership collapsed into anger and heartbreak as he demanded the truth. Ada evaded his questions, torn between her mission and the connection they had formed. The standoff ended when the walkway between her collapsed. Leon lunged in to save her, but she slipped from his grasp, disappearing into the darkness below. As the lab's self-destruct sequence activated, Leon was forced to press on alone. However, his escape route was blocked by one final enemy, being the Tyrant. The creature, now mutated into an even more monstrous form, unleashed its full fury in a last attempt to eliminate him. In a desperate fight, Leon pushed the weapon to its limits, finally destroying it with a rocket launcher in a cinematic showdown. Only after the tyrant's fall did Leon reunite with Claire Redfield and young Sherry Birkin at the escape train beneath the lab. With Sherry's infection halted thanks to the experimental devil vaccine, the three boarded the train and fled as nests collapsed and fire behind them. William Birkin, in his final form, made one last desperate attack aboard the train, but together Leon and Claire fought back, bringing the nightmare to an end. By dawn on September 30th, the nightmare of Racoon City was over. The once thriving community had been reduced to ash and silence, erased in an instant by the government's decision to contain the outbreak through total destruction. As the smoke rose, Leon and Claire went their separate ways. Claire pressed on with her mission to find her brother Chris, while Leon focused on protecting Sherry Birkin, who remained fragile after her brush with the G-Virus. The pair didn't get far as military forces stationed outside the city intercepted them almost immediately. Sherry was taken into federal custody, with her infection marking her both as a liability and an invaluable subject of study. Leon, on the other hand, was interrogated. His captor was Adam Benford, a senior intelligence officer with the US government. Benford quickly realized what Leon represented, not just another survivor, but a liability who had seen too much, and a rare asset with skills that the military's own elite had failed to demonstrate. It was then that Leon was presented with an ultimatum. His life and Sherry's safety would be guaranteed only if he agreed to serve. The mission was to join a newly formed covert task force, answerable directly to the president, and dedicate himself to the eradication of Umbrella and the prevention of future biohazard disasters. At that moment, Leon's fate was sealed. The rookie officer who had once dreamed of protecting a city would now become a weapon in service of an entire nation. What followed was a major transformation. Intense training forged Leon into something far removed from the young cop who had stepped into Racoon City days earlier. He became an expert in close quarters combat, firearms, and tactical operations, developing the sharp instincts of a field agent. His assignments took him across the globe, investigating Umbrella's networks and dismantling their operations piece by piece. Leon's first major act in this new role came just weeks later. In November of 1998, he quietly dispatched a trusted friend, private investigator Ark Thompson, to infiltrate Umbrella's Sheena Island facility. This was the beginning of Leon's role not as a survivor, but as an active player in the war against bioterror. Meanwhile, Claire's own search for Chris brought her to Europe, where she was captured at Umbrella's Paris facility and imprisoned on Rockford Island. Even from across the world, Claire turned to Leon for help. She managed to send him an email asking him to contact her brother Chris, and Leon did exactly that. He tracked Chris down, relayed Claire's message, and ensured that a rescue mission was launched. While Leon himself was already occupied with another assignment, his intervention set in motion the chain of events that would bring Chris face to face with his sister once more. By 2002, Umbrella was already crumbling under the weight of its own corruption, yet even as its empire fractured, its shadow stretched across the globe. Leon Kennedy, now a hardened government operative, found himself drawn into one of the darker remnants of that legacy. Intelligence suggested that a former Umbrella researcher had aligned with the powerful figure in South America, being a man named Javier Hidalgo. This man was no ordinary criminal. He was a ruthless drug lord who ruled a vast amount of jungle territory with absolute control, his influence extending so deeply that the local government was powerless to resist. His name was spoken in fear, but now his empire carried a new and unsettling dimension, being Umbrella's fingerprints. Reports hinted at strange incidents in the region, echoes of the horrors that had already consumed Racoon City. If left unchecked, the result could be another outbreak. Recognizing the danger, US Command dispatched a covert team. Leon was chosen to lead the investigation, but this time he wouldn't be going alone. His partner was Jack Krauser, a special forces operative known for his skill and precision on the battlefield. Where Leon brought experience with bioorganic weapons, Krauser brought raw military expertise. Together, they were tasked with infiltrating Hidalgo's stronghold, identifying the Umbrella connection, and neutralizing any threat before it spiraled out of control. However, the South American mission quickly descended into chaos. Leon and Krauser were deployed as a two-man unit, navigating through jungle single villages where a T-virus outbreak had already taken hold, corpses reanimated, and entire communities reduced to silence. Yet amid the devastation, they found a single survivor, being a young girl named Manuela. At first, her survival seemed miraculous, but the truth was far darker. Manuela was the daughter of Javier himself, and she carried within her a special virus known as T. Veronica. Javier had infected her deliberately, using the virus not as a weapon, but as a cure, a way to keep his sick daughter alive. As Leon, Krauser, and Manuela pushed deeper into Javier's compound, Leon opened up to his partner. He recounted the horrors of Racoon City, the night that defined him, and Claire Redfield's own brush with T. Veronica during her imprisonment on Rockford Island. Following this, the mission's climax came when Javier, unwilling to lose control, fused his body with the massive plant infected by the T. Veronica virus. The drug lord became a towering abomination, forcing Leon and Krauser into a desperate battle. In the end, it was Manuela who tipped the scales, channeling the virus within her to strike against her father. Javier was destroyed, and the government took Manuela into custody, both as a survivor and as evidence of Umbrella's lingering crimes. The aftermath fractured the partnership. Krauser sustained a serious injury during the operation, one that ended his military career. He was discharged and parted ways with Leon. Later that same year, Leon received word that Krauser had died in an accident. For Leon, it was the quiet end of a partnership cut short, but in the grand scheme of things, it was the beginning of a much more dangerous story, one that would resurface years later when Krauser and Leon's paths collided again under very different circumstances. By 2004, Leon was no longer the rookie who stumbled into Racoon City's nightmare. Years of covert operations and government training had transformed him into one of America's most trusted operatives. That trust would soon be tested when the unimaginable happened. The president's daughter, Ashley Graham, was abducted. With suspicions of a mole inside the government, Leon was sent alone to Spain, tasked with finding her and bringing her home alive. He arrived in the remote, mountainous region of Valdelobos, accompanied only by 2 local officers assigned as escorts. When one of the officers, Castano, wandered off into the forest, Leon followed his trail to an old, decrepit hunting lodge. Inside, he discovered signs of violence, as well as the bloody badge of a missing officer. Moments later, he was attacked by a villager who moved with unnatural aggression. Leon fought back, killing the man, only to watch in horror as the corpse twitched back to life, with tendrils of something inhuman writhing from its broken body. The truth of Valdelobos revealed itself quickly. In the village square, Leon witnessed the surviving police officer burned alive in a ritual as the villagers chanted in unison. Before he could intervene, the mob turned on him. Dozens of hostile villagers swarmed, and among them towered a brute with a burlap sack over his head and wielding a chainsaw. Leon barely survived the onslaught, saved only when the sound of the church bell rang out, sending the villagers into a trance as they abandoned the square in eerie silence. Despite the chaos, Leon pressed on. His mission took an unexpected turn when he crossed paths with Luis Serra, a former Umbrella researcher with knowledge of the cult and their parasite Las Plagas. Before Leon could get answers, they were both captured. Chief Torres Mendez personally injected Leon with the parasite, binding his fate to the cult he had come to destroy. Awakening in chains beside Luis, Leon fought to survive once more. The two managed to break free, but trust did not come easily. Leon immediately ordered his support Ingrid Hunnigan to run a background check on Luis, as he was uneasy about his ties to Umbrella. His suspicions would linger, but in the days ahead, Luis would prove to be more than just a questionable ally. Leon's investigation led him to Mendez's house, where the chief revealed a disturbing truth. The parasite had already begun to take root inside Leon. Before Mendez could finish him, a bullet fired by a mysterious woman in red managed to save him. Pushing on forward, Leon discovered that Ashley Graham was being held in the village church, but the key to her cell had been deliberately hidden across the lake, forcing him to confront the horrors of Lago. It was there that Leon fought the Monstrous del Lago, a parasite-ravaged creature lurking beneath the waters. He barely escaped with his life, collapsing in his boat as the infection inside him worsened. When he came to, his mission grew more urgent than ever. After battling the towering El Gigante and finally breaching the church, Leon finds Ashley. Their reunion was tense at first, with Ashley being frightened while Leon was wary of the dangers closing in. The two barely escaped the church, only to be forced into a desperate stand inside a remote cabin. Joined once more by Luis, Leon fought wave after wave of ganados, holding the horde back until they could finally flee. It was here that Luis's knowledge of the parasite began to show, hinting at his deeper connection to the cult. But Leon had no time for mistrust. The weather grounded their extraction, and Mendez himself pursued them through the rain-soaked village. Their final clash came in the slaughterhouse, where Mendez revealed his true monstrous form. Leon fought through the flames, killing the chief in a brutal battle that left the building collapsing around him. Surviving the inferno, Leon and Ashley pressed onward, unaware that their ordeal in the village was only the beginning. Their path leads them to the looming silhouette of a massive medieval fortress. This was the castle of Ramon Salazar, the young castellan who had pledged himself to the cult of Los Illuminados. Behind its walls lay more secrets of the parasite, and greater dangers than anything they had faced so far. Once inside, Leon and Ashley were confronted by Salazar himself. Small in stature, but consumed by devotion to Sadler, he mocked Leon and demanded Ashley be handed over to fulfill the cult's grand design of spreading Las Plagas across the globe. Leon refused, and the pair were forced into a relentless gauntlet of zealots, their chants echoing through the ancient halls. As they pushed deeper into the fortress, Ashley's condition worsened. The parasite within her began to take control, turning her briefly into a puppet of Sadler's will. In a moment of horror, she snatched Leon's knife and nearly attacked him. Regaining her senses just long enough to realize what she had done, Ashley fled in terror, afraid of hurting him again. Now separated from his charge, Leon pressed on, desperate to find her. It was in these halls that Leon encountered Ada Wong once more, 6 years after their last meeting in Racoon City. As always, Ada was as mysterious as she was alluring, hinting at her involvement with a shadowy organization. She urged Leon to abandon Ashley, claiming she was already doomed. However, Leon refused and continued to press on once Ada fled the room. Eventually, Leon tracked Ashley down, finding her shaken and fearful. He revealed that he too had been implanted with the parasite and reassured her that fear was natural, but surrendering to it was not. The moment bonded them, with Ashley choosing to fight alongside him no matter the cost. But sadly, this respite was short-lived. Ashley was soon captured again, taken by Salazar's right hand, Vertigo, and delivered to the throne room. Leon gave chase, only to be cast into the castle's depths. There, he faced Vertigo in a deadly confrontation through the icy caverns beneath the fortress. Against all odds, Leon managed to defeat the creature and continue to the mines. It was here that fate reunited him with Luis Serra. Despite Leon's suspicions, Luis continued to aid him by supplying suppressants to slow the parasite's grip. Together, the two faced one of the castle's greatest horrors, two towering El Gigantes unleashed in a blast furnace chamber. Using teamwork and the environment to their advantage, the pair brought the beast down. As they continued through the mines, Luis was struck down by Jack Krauser, Leon's partner from the past. This revelation cut deep. Krauser, once a trusted ally, was the mole behind Ashley's kidnapping, and had thrown his lot in with Los Illuminados. Leon's anger intensified, and he began a brawl with Krauser, but after Luis forced Krauser to flee, he handed Leon the key to his hidden laboratory, and urged him to finish what they started. His final words echoed in Leon's mind, that people could change. Meanwhile, Ashley had been taken higher into the castle, to the dreaded clock tower. Leon's pursuit led him into a final confrontation with Salazar himself, where he finally revealed his monstrous form, fusing with the parasite into a grotesque abomination. In a grueling battle, Leon put an end to Salazar's reign, leaving the cult without its most loyal servant. Now in pursuit of Krauser, Leon pressed on to the docks, and with Ada's assistance, he secured passage by boat toward the final stronghold of Los Illuminados, being the heavily fortified island where Ashley was being kept, and where the cult leader Sadler awaited. Their boat ride across the dark waters set the tone, quiet, tense, and heavy with unspoken truths. Leon reflected on Racoon City and how survival had hardened him, admitting that saving one life often came at the cost of many more. He asked Ada if she had changed, or if she was still manipulating events for her own agenda. True to form, she deflected with silence, leaving Leon with more questions than answers. Ahead lay the fortified island stronghold, heavily guarded, crawling with soldiers, researchers, and cult loyalists. Inside its walls, Ashley remained captive, and Leon's infection was rapidly worsening. Fighting his way through the compound, Leon managed to reach her, injecting her with Luis's suppressant to slow the parasite spread. Gratefully, Ashley found new resolve, vowing to finish the mission not only for herself, but in Luis's memory. Deeper within the island, Leon entered the amber storeroom where Osman Sadler awaited. With the power of Las Plagas, Sadler briefly seized control of Leon and Ashley's body, forcing Ashley to turn her weapon against him. For a chilling moment, she nearly pulled the trigger, but her willpower was stronger than the parasite's grip. Sadler captured her regardless, dragging her deeper into the compound while Leon collapsed, barely regaining his freedom. Following this, Leon once again confronted Jack Krauser, his former comrade now consumed by ambition and power. Their brutal duel escalated when Krauser unleashed his mutation, forcing Leon into a desperate fight for survival. In the end, Leon struck the killing blow, with Krauser acknowledging Leon as his best student before his death. The betrayal had come full circle, leaving Leon with yet another scar, both physical and emotional. Enraged, Leon continued on with his pursuit of the cult. With the help of Mike, a combat pilot sent by Hunnigan, Leon gained ground, but only briefly. Swarms of novistadors overwhelmed the skies, tearing Mike's chopper from the air. The explosion lit up the night, and Leon's fury only deepened, as Sadler had taken too much from him already. Leon stormed the heart of the sanctuary and found Ashley bound to a stone altar. Sadler awaited, preaching unity under the holy body as he sought to enslave both of them completely. The parasite inside Leon surged, nearly consuming him, until Ada intervened with well-placed gunfire. With her help, Leon and Ashley fled to Luis's laboratory, where the true battle against Las Plagas was fought. The procedure was agony, but necessary. Ashley endured first, and Leon followed, both of them finally freed from the parasite's grip. For the first time since arriving in Spain, they were finally themselves again, but there was no time to rest. Outside, Leon discovered Ada bound and held as bait. Freeing her came at a cost, as Sadler arrived in his final, horrific form. No longer a man, he mutated into a towering abomination of limbs and eyes, a living nightmare born of the parasite's power. Leon fought with everything he had, striking at Sadler's weak points, enduring blow after blow. Just when it seemed the fight could not be won, Ada returned and tossed Leon the weapon he needed most, being a special rocket launcher. With it, he blasted Sadler apart, shattering the cult once and for all. And after driving Sadler's own staff through his chest, Leon ended the reign of Los Illuminados in fire and ruin. Right after, in true Ada fashion, she vanished just as quickly as she appeared. Claiming the amber sample, she offered Leon a ride, but he refused, claiming that this is where they go their separate ways. It was a parting that stung, but Leon had no time to dwell, as the island was collapsing and Ashley was waiting. Together, Leon and Ashley raced through the ruins, escaping on a jet ski as explosions ripped through the stronghold. As the island began to explode behind them, Ashley offered Leon a place in her protection detail, making a lighthearted joke after so much darkness. Leon declined, but smiled all the same. The mission was finally over. Ashley was safe, but for Leon Kennedy, the fight against bioterror was far from finished. In the years following the fall of Umbrella, the world entered a new era of fear. Bioterrorism was no longer an isolated threat. It had become global. Former Umbrella researchers sold their creations on the black market, and conflicts around the world began to spiral out of control. In an effort to fight back, the US government turned to Will Pharma, a powerful pharmaceutical company, tasking them with producing a T vaccine capable of neutralizing the same virus that destroyed Racoon City. But as history had already proven, every attempt to contain the truth only created cracks for it to escape. In 2002, loyalists to General Miguel Grande unleashed the T-virus during a civil conflict in India. Though the outbreak was contained, the scars it left behind and the reliance of Will Pharma's vaccine would set the stage for what was to come. By November of 2005, the nightmare surfaced again. Harvardville Airport became ground zero for a coordinated bioterror attack. Panic erupted as passengers turned rabid, a commercial airliner crashed into the terminal, and chaos swept through the entire building. The US military rushed to quarantine the area, while the president himself called on a familiar operative, being Leon Kennedy, as very few men understood the T-virus like he did. Leon led a police rescue team into the heart of the airport, navigating through smoke, fire, and swarms of the infected. Among the survivors was Senator Ron Davis, a politician with close ties to Wolpharma, as well as Claire Redfield, now a member of the humanitarian group TerraSave. Together, they escaped the immediate crisis, but the larger mystery had only begun to unravel. Intelligence from Ingrid Hunnigan revealed a disturbing lead. An apprehended soldier from General Grande's army claimed there would be more attacks unless the government acknowledged its ties to the original virus project. Almost simultaneously, Wolpharma's vaccine trucks were bombed across the country. Suspicion quickly fell on Dr. Curtis Miller, a vocal critic of Wolpharma seen at the airport during the attack. Leon partnered with Angela Miller, Curtis's sister and a member of the Special Response Team. Their search for answers led them first to Curtis's home, only to find it destroyed in flames. Moments later, another explosion tore through Wolpharma's Air Dome laboratory, forcing Leon and Angela to respond. Inside the ruined facility, the nightmare only repeated itself. On the upper floors, Leon discovered Claire alive and unharmed, having barely evaded infection. But the deeper they went, the more horrifying the truth became. Dr. Curtis Miller had chosen a path of no return. Consumed by grief and disillusionment, he infected himself with the Golgotha virus, a rare G-virus strain circulating on the black market. His transformation was immediate. His body twisted and his humanity was completely gone. Now a towering G mutant, Curtis rampaged through the lab, slaughtering an entire Ranger unit before turning his monstrous force on Angela, instinctively drawn to her as a host. Leon stood between the creature and its prey, guiding Angela through the collapsing corridors and leading her into the underground levels of the facility. Their escape came at a cost of Curtis's life, as containment protocols triggered an explosion that sent him plummeting into the fire below. For a moment, it seemed the nightmare had ended, but the truth was far more complicated. In the aftermath, Hunnigan relayed new intelligence. General Grande's confession revealed that he was nothing more than a courier, transporting samples of the T-virus, the vaccine, and even the G-virus. The real architect of the crisis was not Curtis Miller, but Wolpharma's own Dr. Frederick Downing. Downing had faked his death in the bombing, planning to disappear with stolen virus samples. His past came to light. He had once been a researcher at Nest during the Racoon City outbreak, escaping with the G-virus and assuming a new identity. For years, he had manipulated events from the shadows, turning both the Indian outbreak and Harvardville into staged crisis, designed to profit from the cycle of infection and cure. Leon, Angela, and Claire tracked him to a handoff location where he was planned to sell the viruses to the highest bidder. There, Downing was finally apprehended and forced to confess. For Angela, it was a bitter closure. For Claire, another reminder that corporations and governments alike would always move to bury the truth. Wolpharma collapsed under the weight of the scandal, but the story didn't end here. Its assets were quietly absorbed by Tricell, a rising pharmaceutical power already tied to Albert Wesker. The torch of bioterror had simply passed to new hands. And for Leon Kennedy, Harvardville was just another chapter in a war with no finish line. He had once again survived, protected his allies, and contained the outbreak. But with every victory came the same grim realization that the threat would only resurface wearing a new face and a new place with even higher stakes. In 2006, bioterror fear was back on American soil. A bomb tore through the Carnegie Museum of Art in Pittsburgh, killing security guard Monica and turning opening week hype into a crime scene. The device matched a signature that Leon had seen before, so the FBI pulled him in. Leon met three key players: Abigail, the museum director, Jamal, head of security, and Detective Joseph. His read was immediate. This bomb wasn't random. It looked built to detonate during the Greco-Roman Antiques launch, but Monica likely triggered it early when she tried to radio Jamal. Even worse, the security system missed the planting entirely. Leon started with personnel. One name instantly flashed red, being Max Storm, a recent transfer recommended by a retired guard, Philip. Leon and Joseph hit Storm's listed address in McKees Rocks and walked into a nightmare. The real Max Storm was packed in a freezer and murdered. An imposter was wearing his life. The fake Max Storm came back mid-search, shot Joseph in the shoulder, and bolted with an accomplice. Leon pushed a pursuit but settled for the van's license plate and the next breadcrumbs upstairs, being paperwork tying the spot to Frank Wright. The conspiracy wasn't just inside the museum, there were threads across the city. By morning, the case ripped wide open. At the hospital, Monica suddenly reanimates on the autopsy table. Leon rushed to the morgue, coordinated with local officers, and contained the first zombie outbreak, but not without casualties. With T-virus exposure confirmed, he moved fast. He told Abigail to flag any staff who worked on the night of the bombing and were suddenly out sick. Two names instantly surfaced, being Jamal and Jose. Leon ordered them to be quarantined and screened, escalated to the CDC, and called for a biohazard sweep of Frank Wright's residence. The message was clear. This wasn't just a bombing. Someone was seeding a T-virus footprint through Pittsburgh, and Leon had his first infected body to prove it. Leon's next stop was Frank Wright's residence, the man tied to the fake Max Storm. Inside, he and the Pittsburgh PD found everything they feared, being chemical residues from bomb making, a city map with Frick Park circled, and a password-protected laptop. It was no longer speculation. Someone had infrastructure, safe houses, and a larger plan already mapped out. But the city wasn't waiting. News hit of a second bombing, this time at the Willie Stargale Community Center, a hub for families and kids. Leon responded with Joseph, who was recovering from his shoulder wound. What they found was worse than fire and rubble. The blast had unleashed a pocket T-virus outbreak. Zombies swarmed responders, and even Rasheen Washington, the center's director, was among the infected. Leon coordinated with Lieutenant Greenwald and his SWAT team, putting down the infected and ordering every exposed civilian to be rushed to the hospital for screening. Once the dust settled, Leon and Greenwald dug into Wright's seized laptop. That's when the ideology behind the carnage finally surfaced. The files referenced the Population Correction Movement, which is a radical group convinced that the world's growth had doomed resources. Articles about birth rates, food shortages, and correction strategies filled the archives, and Leon ultimately connected the dots. The bomb at the museum, the attack at the community center, they weren't random. They were trials by fire, small-scale demonstrations staged to terrify the public and prove a point. And to top it all off, PNC Park was the next likely target, with thousands gathering for a Pirates game that very night. The fight was escalating fast. The Population Correction Movement had a motive, a platform, and a virus to back their threats, and Leon was suddenly racing not just against bombs, but against a manufactured outbreak designed to strike fear into the heart of America. At the hospital, Leon's worst fears played out. Survivors from the bombings, already sick with flu-like symptoms, were under observation. Among them were Jamal and Jose, both linked to the museum staff. Leon urged doctors to treat every case as potential T-virus exposure, demanding hazmat protocols and federal testing. Then came the blow he didn't see coming. Joseph, the detective who had stood beside him since day one, suddenly collapsed into cardiac arrest. He was pronounced dead, only to reanimate minutes later, and ultimately, Leon was forced to put him down himself. As Leon regrouped, more bad news came in. Abigail, the museum director he had trusted, had apparently taken sick leave. Soon after, both she and her husband succumbed to infection. The virus was carving its way through Pittsburgh, and the conspiracy that had birthed it was beginning to surface. At Police HQ, Leon and Greenwald watched as Riley Queen, leader of the Population Correction Movement, appeared on a televised broadcast. Queen openly claims responsibility for the bombings, framing them as nothing more than a demonstration of what his group could unleash. He warned the nation to expect more and to fear more. The big break came from Frank Wright, now in ICU from infection. Under strict protocols, Leon interrogated him before the virus claimed his life. Frank confessed that the Population Correction Movement operated out of a cabin in Pennsylvania. Leon wasted no time. He led a SWAT raid on the site. Inside, they eliminated several operatives and cornered Queen himself. Wounded, he was dragged into custody, his promises of population correction silenced for good. In the aftermath, Leon stood above a police press conference, watching the city try to reassure itself. For him, there was no such thing as closure. The T-virus had once again cut through innocence, turning friends, colleagues, and civilians into pawns of bioterror. And after it all, Leon Kennedy's war rolled on, as he was summoned back to Washington with his next assignment already waiting. Shortly after the chaos in Pittsburgh, the United States faced yet another crisis. An unknown hacker had breached confidential White House files, raising fears of an inside mole. President Graham, alongside his closest advisors, launched an internal investigation. 4 agents were selected to lead the inquiry, being Jason, Shen Mei, Patrick, and Leon Kennedy. But as Leon arrived at the White House, the situation collapsed into chaos. The power cut out, and Secret Service scrambled to secure the president, and before anyone could act, the dead began to rise inside the Oval Office. Leon was the first to react, saving Patrick from a zombified press secretary before warning Graham of the outbreak. What followed was a brutal close-quarters fight as zombies spread rapidly through the White House halls. Leon, Jason, and Shen Mei fought side by side, cutting down the infected, while Patrick was ordered to escort Graham to the bunker. Hours later, the building was purged of the threat, but the attack was quietly buried. Officially, the staff had merely, quote, taken leave. Unofficially, Leon knew something larger was in motion. His suspicion only deepened when Claire Redfield appeared in Washington, carrying evidence of a biohazard in Penamstan. The investigation's trail led overseas. Classified files pointed toward a secret bioresearch facility in Shanghai. To uncover the truth, Leon, Jason, and Shen Mei were ordered to infiltrate the site, embarking from Guam aboard a stealth-modified submarine. It was during this voyage that tensions surfaced. Jason spoke of his time in the Penamstan Civil War, framing Racoon City's nuclear destruction as a necessary evil to protect America. Leon pushed back, still haunted by the Army's cowardly withdrawal during the outbreak, leaving countless civilians to die. The debate was cut short when disaster struck. The submarine violently rocked. Leon rushed to the bridge, finding the crew slaughtered, while Jason and Shen Mei discovered the engineers dead, with mutant rats crawling through their corpses. Armed combat was impossible in such close quarters, so Leon sealed the infestation behind heavy hatches. But then the worst came. The submarine's self-destruct sequence initiated. Fighting his way past another swarm of infected rats, Leon barely reached the escaped craft. Yet, as he climbed aboard, he found himself staring down Shen Mei's pistol. At Jason's command, she lowered it, but it was then that Leon was taken prisoner. Bound and forced to comply, he was dragged into Shanghai as the submarine exploded behind them, realizing that he had been pulled into something deeper than a simple hack or outbreak. Leon was escorted to Shanghai, where Jason and Shen Mei established their safe house. Leon suspected betrayal, believing the two to be aligned with Chinese intelligence, but Jason pushed another angle, a government conspiracy buried in the ashes of Penamstan. The argument turned violent. Gunfire erupted, Jason was wounded, and Shen Mei fled the area. Leon pursued her to her family's mansion outside the city. Inside, he found a grim truth. Her brother Junshi, a soldier from Penamstan's Mad Dogs, had been smuggled home after contracting a horrifying condition known as cannibal disease. Shen Mei had been ordered to abandon him during the war, but refused. For years, she and Jason searched for proof that Secretary Wilson had weaponized the conflict to test bioorganic weapons. Their key evidence lay in a chip implanted in her brother's body, silently recording data since the war. But before Leon could process the weight of it, the mansion was engulfed in a devastating explosion. Junshi, Shen Mei's grandfather, and even her confidant Haoran perished beneath the rubble. Leon dragged Shen Mei from the fire, but the truth was clear. Jason was pulling strings, and his quest for justice was twisting into vengeance. The trail brought Leon, Shen Mei, and Claire back to the US, where the conspiracy led to a research facility buried beneath Andrews Air Force Base. President Graham was giving a press conference above ground, unaware of the storm brewing below. Inside the subterranean complex, Leon discovered the full scale of Wilson's operations, finding super soldiers being incubated, experimented on, and then disposed of like trash. Here, Jason's facade shattered. He had stopped taking his inhibitor, embracing mutation to prove his point to the world. His body twisted into a towering bioweapon as Wilson himself was bitten and infected during the chaos. As alarms blared, the facility initiated fail-safe protocols, flushing containment tanks into massive vats of acid. Jason, locked in by his own fury, pursued Leon and Shen Mei with monstrous strength. Amid the chaos, Claire was also discovered, kidnapped by Wilson's agents, and left to die as the acid levels rose. Leon abandoned pursuit of Jason to save her, reinforcing the line that defined him: people before politics. The descent into madness climaxed when Leon armed against Jason's rampage. Heavy weapons and desperation bought moments of survival, but Jason proved nearly unstoppable. In one brutal exchange, Jason nearly killed Leon, only for Kennedy to drop the floor beneath them, sending both plummeting toward the acid. Jason clung to the steel framework, half dissolving but still alive, snarling that the world needed to feel true fear. Leon, on the other hand, pulled himself to safety, watching the once proud soldier vanish into the acidic depths. On the surface, Air Force One departed with President Graham secured. Leon reunited with Claire outside the White House, but their conversation carried no comfort. She pressed Leon for the incriminating chip, determined to expose the conspiracy through the press. However, Leon refused, haunted by Jason's warning that unleashing the truth would spread terror, not justice. Claire walked away disappointed, leaving Leon alone with his burden. In the end, the incident was buried like so many before it. Jason was dead, Wilson's crimes obscured, and the truth locked behind classified walls. Leon moved forward, his resolve hardened, but his faith in government eroded even further. Once again, he had saved lives, but at the cost of truth, leaving the cycle of fear and bioterror to continue. In 2011, the world of counter-bioterrorism was changing. President Adam Benford, a trusted friend of Leon, had reorganized operations under the newly established Division of Security Operations. This unit was formed to take the fight directly to bioterror threats, and Leon was among its most trusted agents. That year, reports surfaced from the war-torn Eastern Slav Republic. Rebel forces, locked in a brutal civil war, were allegedly deploying bioorganic weapons against government troops. To most, it was just a rumor, but to Leon, it was a call to action. Though his superiors ordered him to withdraw, Leon refused. His instincts told him something darker was at play. The streets of Holograd, the capital city, were little more than a battlefield. Smoke, gunfire, and the screams of civilians painted a grim picture of a nation in collapse. Leon pressed forward, meeting a CIA contact codenamed Scarecrow. But before the man could fully brief him, Lickers descended on their position. Scarecrow was fatally wounded, and with his dying breath, he left Leon only a single cryptic word, being, quote, beekeeper. Not long after, Leon was captured by rebel forces led by Ivan Judovanich, a man who had held the key to the rebels' secret. Bound and interrogated, Leon quickly realized Judovanich was gravely ill. The truth became clear. He had willingly exposed himself to a dominant Plaga parasite, granting him control over the liquors but slowly rotting his body from within. Rather than succumb to the inevitable transformation, Judovanich ended his own life, leaving leadership to his lieutenants Alexander and a young fighter known as JD. It was during his time with the rebels that Leon saw the true horror of their methods. Civilians, innocent men and women were being implanted with Plaga parasites, transformed into mindless ganados and unleashed as weapons of war. JD, who had been tasked with guarding Leon, struggled to comprehend what he was seeing. Leon told him the harsh truth: those infected could never return to being human. At best, severing the spinal cord could halt the parasite's control, but it was a mercy, not a cure. For JD, it was a brutal revelation. He wanted to believe the rebels were fighting for freedom, but the reality was they were condemning their own people to monstrosity. Through these encounters, JD began to open up about his comrade Buddy, a man whose tragic past defined his every choice. Years earlier, Buddy had been a teacher. When government soldiers mistakenly believed his school to be aiding the rebels, they launched an attack. His students and his fiancée Irina were slaughtered in the crossfire. That trauma led Buddy to embrace the resistance, and to see the Plaga as a weapon that could finally even the odds. For Leon, this was a turning point. He wasn't just facing another outbreak, he was standing in the middle of a war, where grief and vengeance had blurred the lines between freedom fighters and monsters. Leon's investigation eventually led him to the central marketplace, where he hoped to intercept the Plaga shipment meant for the rebels, but instead of finding answers, he found Ada Wong. Their reunion was as tense as it was familiar. Leon struck first, suspecting her involvement in the Plaga trade, but Ada, ever elusive, parried his blows with practiced grace. When he finally recognized her, his questions cut sharper than his knife. Why was she here? Was she responsible for unleashing the parasites into this war zone? Ada only smirked. To her, the Plaga were defective products and not worth her time. She teased Leon about the past, even flirting with the idea of continuing what they left unfinished 6 years prior. But when Leon pressed harder, she slipped away into the chaos, leaving him with more questions than answers. Returning to the Rebels' church hideout, Leon found devastation waiting. Most of the fighters had been slaughtered, and JD, the young rebel who had guarded him before, begins to stagger forward. In a pained confession, he admitted he let his guard down only for a moment, and the Plaga had claimed him. His body was beginning to turn, the parasite crawling its way through his nervous system. Before the transformation completed, JD pressed Leon to save Buddy. He wanted Leon to reach him before the parasite consumed his friend completely. And then, with trembling hands and his last moments of humanity, JD turned on Buddy, not in hatred, but as a final warning. It was then that Leon had no choice but to put him down. This loss shattered what little hope Buddy had left. Grief turned to fury, and he lashed out at Leon, refusing to surrender the Plaga parasite case. To him, the parasite was still the only way to fight back against the government that had murdered his loved ones. Leon tried to reason with him, telling Buddy that revenge through bioweapons would only lead to more tragedy, but Buddy's refusal hardened into resolve. He would rather gamble his humanity than see his struggle erased. For Leon, it was the same haunting pattern he had seen time and time again. Good people pushed past their breaking point, clinging to monsters in the name of justice. Leon's pursuit of the truth brought him deep beneath the ruined presidential palace, where he uncovered a hidden BOW facility. Here, he crossed paths with Ada once more. She revealed that the Eastern Slav government was mass-producing controlled plagas, parasites designed to enslave soldiers like puppets. Their conversation didn't last long, as the pair were surrounded by heavily armed guards and were confronted by President Svetlana herself. Svetlana exposed her role in orchestrating the Plaga program, wanting it as the nation's last defense in a collapsing civil war. But Leon and Ada weren't her prisoners for long. Ada cut the lights, disappearing into the shadows, while Leon seized the chaos to fight his way free. He even managed to take Svetlana hostage for a moment, demanding to know if she was the codenamed Beekeeper responsible for releasing the parasites. She laughed at his ignorance and revealed her true position as the nation's leader before unleashing her own terrifying reinforcements. 2 advanced tyrants stormed into the facility. Their alarms blared as the complex initiated its biohazard purge, and Leon barely escaped the underground chaos alongside Buddy and his pack of lickers. On the surface, the nightmare only escalated. A 3rd tyrant gave chase, forcing Leon and Buddy to improvise a desperate counterattack. Using a tank, incendiary rounds, and even a liquor sacrifice, they managed to destroy the beast limiter and blow its head apart. But before they could catch their breath, the original 2 tyrants emerged from the palace ruins, bearing down on them. Leon was nearly spent, his knife the only weapon left. But just as the creatures closed in, American warplanes streaked overhead, erasing the tyrants in a storm of missiles. The sudden intervention revealed the cruelest truth of all. Washington had been watching the entire conflict unfold, treating Leon's struggle as a pawn in a larger game. As Russian and American forces marched into the city, Leon confronted the broken Buddy. His friend begged for death, unwilling to risk turning into another monster. However, Leon refused. He told Buddy that survival carried a heavier burden, to honor those who had died and to live on for their sake. With precision, Leon severed the Plaga's hold on Buddy's spine, freeing him from control without taking his life. In the aftermath, Svetlana resigned her presidency, the Eastern Slav Republic shifted under new power, and Leon was quietly extracted by the US Air Force for medical treatment. Sitting alone in his quarters, glass in hand, Leon reflected on everything he had witnessed. The rebels had gambled their humanity, Svetlana had gambled her nation, and his own government had gambled with him. For Leon, this was more than just another mission. It was a reminder of the endless cycle of betrayal, politics, and bioweapons that define the world he fought to protect. In June of 2013, Leon found himself once again standing at the center of history. At Ivy University in Tall Oaks, he was summoned by his longtime friend and ally, President Adam Benford. The two had endured years of political pressure, but Benford believed the time had come to reveal the truth about Racoon City, about the United States' involvement, the government's ties to Umbrella, and the cost of silence. It was a decision that would change the course of global politics forever. However, fate intervened. On the evening of June 29th, just before Benford could give his speech, the campus erupted into chaos. A bioterrorist attack had unleashed a new engineered strain of the C virus, and the man Leon trusted most was among its first victims. As the president convulsed and transformed, Leon was left no choice. In a moment of bitter tragedy, he raised his weapon and put his friend down before he could kill Secret Service agent Helena Harper. Shaken but resolute, Leon followed Helena's lead to Tall Oaks Cathedral. She claimed answers awaited there, though her behavior carried the weight of secrets. Beneath the cathedral, Leon uncovered the shocking truth: an entire bioweapons laboratory hidden in the limestone caverns below. There, Helena confessed her own painful involvement. Her sister Deborah had been abducted under the orders of National Security Advisor Derek C. Simmons, forcing Helena into complicity with the very conspiracy that had just claimed the president's life. The truth hit Leon with brutal clarity. Simmons' shadow cabal, known as the Family, had orchestrated the assassination. Their goal was not terror for its own sake, but control. By studying and weaponizing bioorganic outbreaks, they sought to ensure American dominance in the next era of warfare. President Benford's speech threatened to unravel it all, so Simmons silenced him and sacrificed Tall Oaks in the process. By dawn, the city of 77,000 was firebombed, its evidence erased in a cloud of ash. And yet, even as Leon pieced together Simmons' betrayal, another player emerged. A group calling itself Neo Umbrella publicly claimed responsibility for the Tall Oaks disaster, and soon announced their next strike, being an outbreak in the Chinese city of Langchang. For Leon, the nightmare was only beginning. Leon and Helena refused to run. With Simmons now marked as the architect of the president's death, they went underground. With Hunnigan's help, they faked their own deaths to buy time and booked passage to China, following Simmons' trail to Langchang, where another outbreak was already unfolding. But fate struck again midair. During their fight overseas, a grotesque Lepotisa hatched from its chrysalid cocoon inside the cabin. The parasite spewed viral gas, twisting passengers into ravenous infected. Trapped inside a metal tomb at 30,000 feet, Leon and Helena fought desperately to contain the spreading infection. By the time the cockpit failed, the aircraft was doomed. With no choice left, Leon braced for impact as the plane tore itself apart over the outskirts of Langchang. Crawling from the wreckage, Leon immediately crossed paths with two familiar names. Sherry Birkin, now an adult and a government agent in her own right, stood among the survivors. By her side was Jake Mueller, a mercenary with a mysterious past and a hidden bloodline. Leon was shocked to see Sherry again, no longer the frightened child he once protected beneath Racoon City. She explained her mission of protecting Jake, whose immunity to the C virus could be the key to stopping the outbreak. Even as their paths converged, their goals overlapped. Simmons was the target for them all, but before they could regroup, the ground shook with the arrival of a monster unlike anything Leon had ever faced. Ustanak, a hulking bioweapon, relentless and inhuman and equipped with a mechanical claw, descended on them with a singular purpose. The four fought side by side, combining their strength against the creature's brute force. Amid fire and wreckage, the battle raged until a collapsing electrical tower crashed down, separating Leon and Helena from Jake and Sherry. In the chaos, Sherry cried out to Leon, telling him she and Jake would pursue Simmons at the Quan Lung building. Leon could only watch as the tower exploded, praying that they would survive. Even after so many years, the weight of survival still pressed on Leon Kennedy, and now the hunt for Simmons would drag him deeper into the heart of Langchang's nightmare. Once Leon and Helena supposedly found Ada Wong through the ruins of Langchang, they gave chase and cornered her in a dim chamber, only to find that they weren't alone. Chris and his partner Piers Nivens emerged from the shadows, their weapons already trained on Ada. For Chris, this was personal. He believed that she was the one responsible for the deaths of his men, and for the outbreaks that had claimed countless lives across the globe. But before the shot could ring out, Leon struck. With a swift motion, he knocked Chris's weapon aside, the two men colliding in a clash. The struggle was brief but fierce, ending with both men's pistols aimed squarely at one another. The room was thick with tension. Leon's voice cut through first, steady but firm, claiming that Ada was a key witness and not the enemy, and that they needed her alive. Chris, however, was consumed by grief and anger. He spat back that she was the cause of everything, that she was the one who had destroyed his team. Leon responded that Simmons was the true architect of this chaos, the man responsible for more than just a squad, responsible for the deaths of over 70,000 people, including the president himself. And then, in the middle of it all, Ada made her move. A flash bomb exploded in white light, breaking the standoff. By the time their vision cleared, she was already gone. Chris stormed after her, while Leon turned with Helena to continue their pursuit of Simmons. Inside the towering Kwanlung building, Leon and Helena finally cornered Derek Simmons. His smug denial cracked when Sherry and Jake also arrived, demanding answers. Simmons admitted to orchestrating the attacks, but with the arrogance of a man convinced his crimes were justified, blaming Leon for pulling the trigger on Benford and insisting his actions protected US supremacy. Before Leon could bring him in, Simmons' private army, the agents of the family, opened fire. Under heavy assault, Leon urged Sherry and Jake to escape, while he and Helena held the line. Sherry slipped Leon a data chip containing vital information on the C virus before fleeing with Jake, leaving Leon and Helena to face Simmons head-on. The pursuit led onto a speeding train. Simmons, struck by a C-virus dart fired by a Juavo, staggered as his body convulsed. Leon and Helena watched in grim recognition. They had seen this transformation before. Simmons' frame tore itself apart, flesh hardening into jagged bone, his body elongating and warping until he towered over them in a grotesque, canine-like mutation. On the rattling train cars, the battle commenced. Simmons lashed out with monstrous strength, tearing through metal and clawing with beast-like fury. He taunted Helena with the memory of her sister's death, while Leon fought to keep him from derailing the train completely. Their bullets only slowed the creature, forcing them to use the environment itself to gain the upper hand. At one point, Simmons even ripped loose an entire car, hurling it toward them in a display of sheer ferocity. But Leon and Helena refused to break. Timing their attacks, they opened fire in unison, knocking Simmons into the path of the oncoming locomotive. The impact hurled him across the tracks, mangling his body before it snapped back to a frail human shell. For a moment, it finally seemed over, but the C-virus would not release him so easily. As the train tore through the night, Leon and Helena barely crawled ashore after the brutal train battle, exhausted but alive. Almost immediately, Hunnigan reached out, revealing that Shake and Jerry had been abducted, and the data chip Sherry entrusted to Leon might be the key to stopping the C-virus. Before they could plan their next move, Helena noticed something strange above the skyline, being a missile. On the comms, Chris's voice broke in with urgent warning, demanding that they had to get out of Tachi right now. However, it was too late. The missile detonated overhead, releasing a blue fog of C-virus gas that swept across the city. Within moments, chaos erupted. Thousands of civilians screamed as they mutated into grotesque monsters, the streets turning into another nightmare of fire and infection. Leon could only grit his teeth as the memories of Racoon City resurfaced. With the help of scattered BSAA soldiers, Leon and Helena fought through the choking fog, making their way toward the quad tower, now serving as an evacuation hub. But Tachi was collapsing into hell. Gas tankers exploded in the streets, buildings toppled, and waves of infected swarmed every block. Amid the chaos, a familiar figure appeared, being Ada Wong, swooping in by helicopter to provide cover fire. Leon and Helena sprinted beneath the gunfire. Reaching the bridge to the quad tower, their escape seemed possible, until an airliner, torn loose from its crash, slammed into the structure, triggering massive explosions that destroyed the bridge beneath their feet. Leon and Helena barely managed to survive, scrambling toward a BSAA chopper. However, the pilot was revealed to be wounded, leaving Leon to seize the controls himself. With sheer determination, he guided the failing aircraft straight into the side of the quad tower, crash landing inside. Inside the ruined quad tower, Leon and Helena thought they had finally reached safety, but waiting for them was none other than Derek Simmons, no longer human, but a grotesque mass of shifting flesh and bone, each mutation more monstrous than the last. Fueled by rage, Simmons transformed again, towering over them in a nightmarish form. The battle stretched across the tower's heights. Ada Wong, circling in her helicopter, fired on Simmons, offering cover as Leon and Helena fought desperately to bring him down. But Simmons mutated endlessly, from beast-like quadruped to hulking abomination, forcing Leon to push himself to the limit. Each strike reminded him of the chaos Simmons had unleashed. Tall oaks, the president's death, and now Tachi. Later, on a collapsing platform, Simmons nearly threw Leon to his death, leaving him dangling by the edge. But at the last second, Ada appeared and pulled him back. Her presence steadied him just long enough for the two agents to unleash everything they had. Simmons fell once more, but he still wasn't finished. On the tower's roof in the pouring rain, Simmons absorbed infected bodies to fuel a final insect-like mutation, refusing to die. But Leon and Helena improvised. Spotting a lightning rod loosened during the battle, they impaled a zombie and let Simmons draw it in. The rod attracted a massive bolt of lightning, electrocuting him and tearing apart his twisted body. Even then, Simmons crawled after them, dragging himself across the roof. Ada's final gift, a rocket launcher, dropped from her helicopter. Leon seized it and fired point blank, blasting Simmons into the depths of the tower. His broken body fell onto the obelisk below, reverting briefly to his human form before death finally claimed him. As the storm subsided, Leon and Helena staggered to the waiting helicopter. Inside, Helena discovered Ada's compact, left behind on the controls. Hidden inside was a small data disk, undeniable proof of Simmons' crimes, enough to clear both her and Leon of all charges. But Helena, still weighed down by guilt, whispered that she didn't need vindication. But Leon reminded her that this evidence wasn't just about them, it was about truth, about ensuring Simmons' corruption died with him. As their helicopter lifted off into the night, the quad tower collapsing in flames beneath them, Leon knew the nightmare of Simmons was over. In the days following Simmons' death, the chaos in China began to settle. The truth about the C-virus attacks was buried under political red tape, but Leon and Helena were alive to tell the story. Sometime later, Helena returned to her sister's grave as Leon, Ingrid Hunnigan, and other agents stood nearby. For Helena, the weight of guilt still lingered. She confessed that she was ready to face justice, believing herself an accessory to the president's assassination. With quiet resolve, she thanked Leon for standing by her and extended her hands, prepared to be taken into custody. However, Leon stepped forward. Instead of handcuffs, he placed Helena's sidearm back into her palm. Startled, she looked up as he told her that justice has already been served. Simmons was gone, and the truth had been secured. There was no need to condemn her for the crime she had been forced into. Hunnigan agreed, stating the findings would remain classified. For Helena, this was a second chance, one she never expected to receive. As she turned back to her sister's grave, she knew the pain of loss would never fully fade, but she would carry her memory forward, no longer chained by guilt, but with the freedom to live on. In 2014, Leon was sent on yet another mission that would leave deep scars on him. This time, he had led a team of security operations agents to Bethesda, Maryland. Their target was Senator Stephen Irie, a politician secretly leaking sensitive information to the group known as the Family. The plan was simple: apprehend him and extract information, but instead, it all turned into a nightmare. As Leon and his team closed in, every vehicle, from Irie's Porsche to the DSO transport convoy, detonated in a coordinated explosion. In an instant, the entire squad was wiped out. Leon was the sole survivor, pulled from the wreckage and forced to watch his mission collapse in fire and smoke. Later at the morgue, the horror only deepened. As he stood among the charred remains of his comrades, one of the corpses began to stir inside a body bag. The senator's betrayal was now clear. His treachery had unleashed yet another viral attack. Leon was forced to put down the reanimated body of his teammate, only for the rest of the dead to begin rising. Alone in that cold room, he had to kill his friends for a second time, one bullet at a time. This mission left Leon broken. To process the trauma, he retreated into the Colorado wilderness, isolating himself in a secluded mountain lodge. There, he drowned his grief in bottles, numbing the pain of survivors' guilt and the endless cycle of bioterrorism that haunted his career since Racoon City. For Leon, the question weighed heavier than ever. How much longer could he fight this war against bioorganic weapons, and at what cost? Leon's self-imposed exile would not last long. During his stay in Colorado, his drinking and disillusionment only grew, but so too did the threat of bioterror. His old allies Chris and Rebecca eventually tracked him down, and they came bearing urgent news. Glenn Arias, a black market dealer with ties to Los Illuminados, had begun orchestrating attacks across the United States and Mexico. Arias possessed a new viral strain, one that was capable of controlling BOWs through the plaga parasite. At first, Leon refused. He asked the question that haunted him: when would all this fighting finally end? But once Arias' men abducted Rebecca, Leon could no longer stand aside. The fight was no longer about the mission, it was about saving a friend. Together with Chris and the Silver Dagger unit, Leon followed Arias' trail to New York City. Arias planned to unleash his virus through tankers carrying airborne dispersal systems, turning one of the world's most populous cities into a graveyard. For transport, Chris took command of an armored Hummer, while Leon was given a motorcycle. As they tore through the city, Leon took out one of the fuel trucks, while Chris destroyed another. But the mission grew bloodier by the minute. Damien, one of the Silver Dagger's own, was decapitated by infected Cerberus hounds. The pack turned on Chris, only for Leon to roar his motorcycle engine and lure them onto the expressway. In a brutal chase, he gunned the creatures down one by one until the road was littered with corpses. Reuniting with Chris at Arias' headquarters, the two found themselves overwhelmed by wave after wave of the infected. Leon urged Chris to push forward and save Rebecca, while he stayed behind to hold the line. However, unbeknownst to them, Arias had one more surprise. He transformed, mutating into a monstrous creature fueled by rage and plaga power. Leon arrived just in time to save Chris, ramming his motorcycle straight into Arias' legs. What followed was a desperate rooftop battle, Leon dodging, shooting, and striking at every opening. When Arias tried to cling to an escaping Osprey, Leon accelerated his bike one last time, launching it and himself into the monster. With precision, he fired into the wreckage, detonating the motorcycle in a fiery blast that crippled Arias. The fight finally ended, with Chris delivering the final blow, putting Arias down for good. Rebecca was saved, the virus contained, and New York was spared from catastrophe. In the aftermath, Leon stood beside Chris and Rebecca, the city skyline behind them still lit with smoke. For Leon, the victory felt hollow. He reflected on how long this war against BOWs could continue, questioning if there would ever be an end. And so with Arias gone and New York saved, Leon once again walked away from the battlefield, not as a victor, but as a survivor in a war with no end in sight. In 2015, just 1 year after the devastating New York bioterror attack, Leon once again found himself on the front lines of another mission. This time, his orders came directly from the DSO, track down Dr. Antonio Taylor, a man who was a robotics engineer accused of leaking military secrets to foreign powers. Intelligence placed Taylor in San Francisco, but before Leon could even begin his approach, the situation spiraled out of control. Taylor was snatched off the streets by a group of armed kidnappers and stuffed into a van. Leon caught sight of the vehicle and immediately gave chase on his bike, weaving through the highway traffic with precision. But he wasn't the only one on the road. A mysterious motorcyclist appeared behind him, aggressively targeting Leon as if to ensure the kidnappers escape. The fight was brutal. Engines roared, tires screeched, and in the chaos, Leon was knocked from his bike. Once the helmet came off, the rider revealed herself, being none other than Maria Gomez, the vengeful survivor of the New York outbreak, still loyal to the family of Glenn Arias. With a cold glare, she vaulted back to the kidnapper's van, leaving Leon sprawled on the asphalt. The trail soon led Leon across the bay to Alcatraz Island, now serving as a popular tourist attraction. But beneath the surface, something sinister was brewing. As Leon scoured the prison's sewage tunnels, he wasn't alone. In the shadows, he crossed paths with Jill Valentine, who was conducting her own investigation into the string of recent murders linked to the city. Though surprised by the encounter, the two quickly realized their missions overlapped, and before long, survival demanded cooperation. The tunnels echoed with the shrieks of the dead as zombified tourists shambled towards them. But what's even worse is that they were stalked by amphibian lickers, grotesque mutations that leapt from the water with razor-sharp claws. Side by side, Leon and Jill fought their way through the creatures, their gunfire and blades working in unison. At the height of the chaos, Leon triggered an explosion to clear the path, buying them precious seconds to escape deeper into the tunnels. Pressing forward, the pair uncovered remnants of the island's military past. Old transport tunnels, once used for ammunition shipments, now hid something far worse, being incubation chambers, where liquor larvae were held in containment. On top of this, there were blueprints for mosquito drones, the very machines responsible for spreading infection throughout the city. It was a chilling discovery, proof of a new kind of bioterror that could strike with precision. For Leon, the mission was no longer just about rescuing Taylor, it was about uncovering the puppet masters behind this operation. And in Jill Valentine, he had not only found an ally, but someone who understood all too well the cost of fighting a war against monsters born of human ambition. Deeper within the prison, Leon and Jill were finally reunited with the rest of their allies. Chris and Claire had been captured, their bodies already showing signs of infection. In the corner of the cell was none other than Dr. Antonio Taylor, the very man Leon had been ordered to recover. But before they could fully piece the situation together, the trap was finally sprung. A mosquito drone buzzed through the air and pierced Leon's neck, injecting the virus into his bloodstream. It was there that the mastermind finally stepped out of the shadows. Dylan Blake, a former USS operative and once an agent of Umbrella's own Black Ops unit. Standing at his side was Maria Gomez, the same rider who had knocked Leon off his bike. Together, they revealed their intent. Vengeance not just against one government or organization, but against every power profiting from the cycle of bioterror. Agencies like the DSO, the BSAA, and even TerraSafe. Dylan condemned Leon directly, mocking him for his blind loyalty to a system that had covered up atrocity after atrocity. For Dylan, the endless war of BOWs would only end when the world's institutions were dragged into the same nightmare they perpetuated. His plan was chilling: unleash his drone army, infect entire populations, and prove that no one was safe. Once Taylor tried to reason with him, Dylan shot the doctor in cold blood. The scientist used his final moments to entrust Claire with a backdoor code, capable of seizing control of the drones. From there, the group was separated in the chaos, and Leon soon found himself face to face with Maria once again. Still weakened from the drone sting, he struggled to match her speed and fury. Maria fought like a woman possessed, every strike fueled by rage over her father's death at Arius' downfall. She slashed, struck, and taunted, gaining the upper hand as Leon barely deflected blow after blow. But Leon was no stranger to desperation. Timing his movements with precision, he baited her into overextending. In a final decisive move, Leon drove Maria onto a jagged steel girder, impaling her through her chest. Gasping, she pulled herself free, her body finally giving out. Leon offered her quiet words, hoping she might find peace in death and reunite with her father she sought to avenge. With Maria finally gone, the surviving agents pressed forward into the heart of the facility. But Dylan wasn't finished. Refusing to be taken down quietly, he fused his infected body with a massive megalodon specimen, transforming into a towering aquatic monstrosity. His warped form was nearly invincible, a grotesque fusion of man, parasite, and predator. The battlefield instantly became chaos. Dylan's enormous body tore through the armory as the group launched everything they had at him. Heavy weaponry, explosives, and concentrated gunfire barely slowed the creature down. Leon barked orders to Claire and Rebecca, telling them to use Taylor's backdoor code to override the swarm of drones, while he, Chris, and Jill hold Dylan at bay. Leon was the first to escalate, commandeering a fuel truck and ramming it straight into Dylan's bulk. Tossing a grenade, he triggered a fiery explosion, but even that failed to put the beast down. Jill recovered a prototype plasma rifle, its massive coils charging to full capacity. Leon and Chris drew Dylan's attention, circling him and peppering his limbs with gunfire as Jill lined up the shot. But its upper body continued on, desperate to drag itself towards freedom. At the critical moment, Claire and Rebecca successfully redirected the drones. Instead of targeting humans, the swarm turned on Dylan, injecting him with a lethal overdose of the virus. His movements began to slow, his form weakening, but he still crawled toward the open waters of the bay. That was when Leon and Chris acted in unison, rigging a massive projectile to lock the floodgate chains around Dylan's neck. Pinned in place, the monster could only thrash helplessly as Jill delivered the killing blow by planting a satchel of grenades that detonated in a deafening explosion. And with that, the fused monstrosity of Dylan Blake was no more. Now exhausted, the group gathered outside the prison as dawn broke over Alcatraz. Reinforcements arrived to secure the island, but for Leon, Chris, Jill, Claire, and Rebecca, the mission had already cost enough. They all shared a quiet moment, reflecting on the endless cycle of bioterrorism that they seemed trapped in. For now, the nightmare was over, but for Leon and his allies, the fight was far from finished. Click this video here to find out the full story of Alyssa Ashcroft. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.